It's time to make a character. This video series will cover all the major parts of making a character in Blender, like how to start the model, build their various parts, how to get some good stylized materials for them, even creating an outline, and lastly all the parts that'll go into rigging him for animation. This method of making a character should be useful for making tons of different characters, not just the one I'll be making for the tutorial, so it'll be great for starting to make your own characters in Blender. While this is a tutorial for beginners, for one, this isn't for people who haven't touched Blender at all. If that's you, then I'd recommend going to my other video, Blender for Absolute Beginners. It's only 36 minutes, and it should get you caught up. And for two, character modeling is inherently a pretty intermediate challenge, so even though I'm going to try and go through every little thing you need to know, it's definitely a good idea to get used to modeling as a whole before tackling characters. Or you can just go for it. I'm not your mom. Like with my other tutorial, I'll put a link to the script that I wrote for this video in the description and comments, where you can use Ctrl F to search for keywords in the doc, so you don't have to scroll through the video to find things. It includes every part of this tutorial, so it's like 80 pages long. You could even read ahead if you wanted to, but I wouldn't recommend it. And of course, please put any issues you're experiencing in the comments, no matter what part of the series you're on. I'll try to help you out as much as I can. Most problems have super easy solutions when you're just starting out, so don't be afraid to ask. Also, I'm not a master at making tutorials, so there's probably some part of the process I'll forget to mention, so it might not even be your fault. Okay, so step one is just knowing what character you want to model in the first place. In this tutorial, we're going to model this guy. He's a relatively simple character, but we'll end up teaching you a lot of things. And the method you'll follow for him can work for a lot of different characters, so it'll be a good thing to get started with. It'll be 7 videos in total, including this one. So we'll start with blocking out, then building the head, then the rest of the body, then doing the materials, then starting the rig, then rigging his face, and then other parts like texturing and clothes. I'll add to the list if I think of something, or if a lot of people want to know something special. Now let's start with the reference image. Normally, I just create a super vague sketch of the character to get started with, but in this case, I made a full reference, including a reference for the hands. This is pretty much just a tracing of the original test model I made before this, so it should be pretty solid. You can download it in the Google Drive link below. You can definitely draw your own, but you're going to quickly realize how hard it is to make a perfect reference for a 3D character. You never realize how much you can get away with in 2D that's super hard to interpret into 3D. Normally, I just vibe out what looks good in 3D, just using the reference as a starting point, but I'd have to guess a lot of people want a true reference, so I'll use one for this tutorial. To add it to your scene, you can either just drag the file directly into your viewport, or you can go to Add, Image, Reference. It'll spawn as a special kind of image in the scene, which is facing your view, so we need to rotate it so you can use it right. Hit N to bring out this panel on the right, where it shows its rotation. Just set it to 90, 0, 0. Then, just move it either in front or behind of the middle of the scene, depending on which you prefer. I set the image up so if the X location at the top here is at 0, it should be in the center. Then, down here in the red Image tab, you can turn on opacity and turn it down to whatever you want. Personally, I go as low as 0.1 or 10%. Repeat those steps with the side and hand images, with them being rotated at 90, 0, 90, and 0, 0, 0, respectively. Although the hand one can just be put aside for later. Now it's all set up. Although, when we're modeling, you might end up selecting the reference image when you want to select the object. To fix that, we can make it so we can't select the reference at all. In the top of the outliner, under this tab that looks like a funnel, turn on the icon that looks like a cursor. This will let us disable whether or not we can select certain objects, so you can turn off the cursor on each reference image. But I like adding all the references to a single collection, so I can turn it on and off with only one click. Now we're actually all set up. One important note, I'll be saying left and right a lot throughout this tutorial, but I sometimes mean different things. When referring to UI elements or buttons, I'll be using your left and right. But when referring to stuff in the 3D space itself, it'll actually be reversed, because we will then be using your character's left and right. So if I'm telling you to go to the bottom left of the screen, it'll be your left. But when we're making your character's hands, you'll obviously need to refer to them as the character would. That's how a lot of stuff in Blender uses it, so it's best to get used to it now. Just pay attention to my cursor if it gets confusing. Okay, before we start for real, you can obviously see my scene already has a ton of stuff set up. All of this stuff, like the background and floor, are all just cosmetic stuff that I like having around when I build characters. You don't actually need any of this. But if you'd like to have it anyway, you can download my starting file on my Gumroad for free. But again, don't worry about it. I'll explain everything you need to know. I'm going to turn it all off until we start rigging anyway. And the very last thing, add-ons. I feel like a lot of people turn up their noses at add-ons because it feels like cheating or whatever. So I'm here to say, don't resist add-ons. While you do want to learn the base process of doing things first, a lot of add-ons are just for quality of life and save you a ton of time. The one add-on I want you to download for this part of the tutorial is called Loop Tools. All it does is give you a ton of useful buttons in the side menu, which will be super useful to us later, and I use them a lot in my own modeling process. To add add-ons, in the top left, go to Edit, Preferences, Extensions. Here you can super easily download add-ons. Just make sure you allow online access. Type in Loop Tools in the search, and click Install. I already have it installed. Then you can turn it on and off in the add-on section. Also, you could even download themes here if you want, which is why my UI might look different. The theme I use is called Gold Pro, if you want it too. Now all the housekeeping is done, so let's actually get to making the body. The first step of any model, even if you're a master doing this at a professional level, is blocking out, which means we start by using simple shapes to get the general idea of what our character will look like. Let's start with the head. As mentioned in my absolute beginner tutorial, we want to figure out what primitive shape is the best fit for the part you're trying to make. So the guy's head is pretty round, so we start with a sphere. Well, not exactly. Start with a cube. I'll explain why later. Let's just get everything into place. Move it into the general location of the head, but make sure to not move it left or right, since this is the middle of the scene, and we need to keep it that way. For the body, we should also start with a cube, but let's use the scale tool to flatten it a bit on the y-axis, and then maybe a bit on the x-axis. And again, make sure to not move it left or right. Just so you know, the three axes of 3D space in Blender are x, left and right, y, forward and back, and z, up and down. You can see which is which in the little gizmo in the top right. Anyway, for the limbs, let's add a cylinder. But before you click anything, we can actually edit some things about the objects we just added in this little pop-up window in the bottom left. The number at the top is how many edges we want around the circumference of it. Turn that down to 8, which lowers its resolution. If we plan ahead, we can actually use these parts in our final body. If we keep its resolution down, it'll be a lot easier to attach it to the body later. Also in this menu is the radius, which we obviously want to be thinner. Click and drag on the number so you can just eyeball whatever looks right. Same for the depth, but we'll probably have to change that one later anyway. The last bit is the cap fill, which if you switch it to nothing, you can see it opens up the top and bottom of the cylinder, which will just save us a step later, since we don't actually want those faces. Now since we want the arms and legs to look pretty much the same, right-click and duplicate it, and move one dupe to the location for each. The legs are already rotated right, but for the arms, we want the character to be in a T-pose, which I'm sure you already know about if you're into video games. This is just the default unrigged pose of the character, so it's both easier to model and easier to rig when we get to that point. To make it easy, when using the rotate tool, you can hold Control to rotate it on set increments, so it'll snap right into place when it hits 90 degrees. Just like I mentioned with the reference image, you could open up the side menu by pressing N and seeing what its rotation is. In this case, we want the Y rotation to be 90. Now that our parts are somewhat in place, we can start by using the reference, but it's kind of hard to get a good idea of where the parts should go in that case, because our view has depth. We can change this though. By pressing 1 on your numpad specifically, it'll completely flatten out the view. This is called orthographic projection, which is necessary for modeling with a reference, and just handy in general. You can also go to this view by clicking on the axis in the top right gizmo, specifically the negative Y part. Now let's get this stuff into the right place. Shift select each object and go into edit mode, so we can edit them all at the same time. For the head, we want to move and scale the whole thing, so you can select it all by hovering over it and pressing L, which stands for select linked. We'll have to edit this one a lot more later, so just get it a little closer. You can go into side orthographic view with numpad 3, or clicking the positive X axis. The numpad numbers are all used for orthographic view. As I move the torso, I'm seeing that our references aren't at the same height. So make sure you can select the references again, and in the right panel, you can copy its Z location, or its vertical location, and paste it onto the other reference's Z location. We should also make sure that the reference's feet are right on the ground, so make sure they sit right on this colored line. Then copy that Z location to the other reference. Now we can line everything out perfectly. For the arms and legs, alt-click the ends of each cylinder. Then move the wrist to the reference's wrist, and the shoulder to the shoulder. And then the top of the thigh and the ankle too, scaling out each part to make it fit the reference. Alright, everything is moved into place, but we only have one set of limbs. This is because there's a modifier that'll save us a bunch of modeling time, which is the mirror modifier. Humans are mostly symmetrical, so we might as well use it. But before we add it to anything, we need to set the model up so it'll work right. For one, all of these pieces are different objects, which all have their own set of modifiers. So if you shift select every part and hit Ctrl J, it'll join each object into a single one. So we just need one modifier for the whole thing. But we actually need to care about what order we select the objects in. The mirror modifier mirrors across the object's origin point, which is this orange dot you see when you select it. So for the torso, it's here. But for the arms, it's here. We want to use the torso's origin point as the mirror point for the whole body. So make sure that in the right menu, it's at 0 in its X location. Same for the head. The numbers here are the origin point's location in 3D space. Then shift select the objects, but make sure you select the torso last. You can deselect it and reselect it to make sure it was selected last. Then pressing Ctrl J will sort all other objects into its group. Now the last step is to actually cut off the other side of the torso and head that are on the right side of the torso. The character's right, your left, since that part will get filled in by the mirror modifier, and it'll overlap if we don't get rid of it. Go to edit mode and use Ctrl R to start a loop cut over the center of the torso, and click to add it in, and right click so it doesn't move from its original spot. You can use the loop cut tool, but when modeling a character, you do a lot of loop cutting, so it'll be handy to know the shortcut, which is Ctrl R. Using the shortcut has its own benefits too, but I'll explain that later. Now shift select all of the verts in the right face of the torso, and X or delete to delete them, and delete vertices, so delete these faces along with it. Repeat those steps with the head. Now everything is sorted, so we can finally go to the blue wrench tab and add the mirror modifier by searching for it. It fills in the right half of the body, and any change that we make will automatically be applied to the other side. Now it's important to know some quirks that'll happen with this modifier. As is the case with all modifiers, the parts of the model that it's adding don't actually exist yet. So just as an example, if we hit A to select all the verts in edit mode, you can see that the center point of our selection is actually a bit off to the right. And when we scale it down with S, you can see it separates the model from its mirrored side. For one, in the modifier settings, you can enable clipping, which at least makes it so the verts in the mirrored center are locked together and won't ever separate. But it's still scaling weird. This is just a quirk that you'll have to learn to deal with, more or less. You can do some special stuff to change where you're scaling from, but it's more efficient to just learn ways around it. One way is to actually use the shortcut Alt-S, which instead of scaling to the center point of everything you selected, will scale each face inward or outward, which can have its own quirks, but it generally works a lot better with parts that are being mirrored, like the torso. And the last thing to know, when we add objects in edit mode, will be a part of the selected group, which is more efficient than just Ctrl J-ing every time. But they will have the mirror modifier, and they might not be ready to have it yet. We can solve this issue by moving the 3D cursor, which is this little lifesaver thing at the bottom. It has a ton of uses, but its primary function is to be where every object spawns when we add them. We move it by shift right-clicking. So if it's on the left side, which is the real side of the model, we can add objects and they'll be mirrored normally. Then if you need to, you can add loop cuts and delete the right side, and then move them into the center to glue them to the mirrored side. Let's add some cubes for the hands and feet. Let's squish the hand cube down, and resize the foot cube so it's about as thick as a leg, but obviously longer in the front to fit the reference. Make sure to not accidentally glue them in the middle. Just to make things go back to normal, let's return the 3D cursor back to where it was. You can do this by pressing Shift S and selecting Cursor to World Origin. The other options are great for positioning the 3D cursor in other ways too, so remember it for later. Now that all of that is dealt with, we can add more loops to these parts to refine the shape further. For the torso, add one loop around the waist. When we add it with a shortcut, we can slide it down automatically, which the tool doesn't let us do. Now we can select the two verts on the edge and move them inward, and moving the back edge inward too, to make a slight hourglass shape. I won't describe every action I'm doing out loud, so if you want to copy me exactly, just pay attention. But you can edit all this stuff to your own liking, so don't worry about getting it exact. For the feet, you can Ctrl R to add a loop like usual, but one thing the shortcut lets us do, while hovering over the area we want to add the loop to, you can scroll up and down to change the number of loops that we want to add. Here, let's add 2. We can move this one so there's a sort of square face under the leg. And we can move the other one to the edge of the toe. And we can grab these 4 verts around the toe and lower them, giving us a nice simple shoe-like shape. You can go off on your own as much as you'd like, of course. You don't have to copy everything I do. Just remember that if you move the legs too close to each other, they'll get glued by the mirror modifier. You can fix that by disabling clipping in the modifier, and then simply moving them away from each other, but it's generally a lot better to just be careful about it. And that's our character blocked out, so in the next video we'll be building the head. If you ever have any questions or problems during the process, comment them below or go to my Discord server where I have a help channel where you can ask questions. I'll try to answer as many as I can. See you in the next one.